Fredericton says a report will be released about the controversial arrest of blogger Charles Leblanc. Now, you'll remember the city police arrested Leblanc last winter and charged him with criminal libel after he insulted one of their officers. The charge was dropped after the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and others pointed out that that charge had been ruled unconstitutional in other jurisdictions in other cases. So, many people questioned and criticized it all, and the city later hired Bernard Richard to take a look at what happened. Police Chief Barry McKnight retired soon after, but McKnight said his retirement had nothing to do with the case. It was something he'd already been planning. Joining me on the line now is Nathalie Desrosiers. She is a lawyer and general counsel of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, and she made submissions to Bernard Richard for today's report. Good morning, Ms. Desrosiers. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
What are the questions that you are hoping that Bernard Richard will answer in his report?
Well, we are hoping first that he will examine the question of what should a police service do when one of the officers is being libeled or whose reputation is tarnished by some comments. Our submissions were that certainly I think the police should correct the information in the public domain and has the means to do that and should support his or the officer in question, but should not use a criminal charge like criminal libel to go after a citizen who's criticizing the police. First, because the criminal libel charge has been ruled unconstitutional, and secondly, because we should protect the right of citizens to criticize the establishment, the authorities, and we should be wary of using a criminal law to chill expression, to silence criticism.
Any interest in how the chain of command worked in this particular example, this particular case?
Well, I think certainly we would want to make sure that when a police officer is the victim or the alleged victim of a crime or feels slighted in some way, he or she is not the one making the decision as to whether charges should be made. It's unbecoming, and it should certainly, I think, it's not good governance to charge that person with that responsibility. And in this case, I think that was one of the issue as well, was whether the officer in question was the one that decided to lay the charge. But that's a minor issue in a way because, in our view, I think the police service should recognize that there will be people discontent with their services. There will be some criticism, and the appropriate way is to respond by more speech, not try to silence the speech.
What was your contribution to Mr. Richard's report?
Well, we made submissions and sent him, certainly, I think, the law on the question, what was the criminal, the jurisdiction that found the criminal libel charges to be unconstitutional. I'm sure he had that already. But I think our position is that it's helpful, I think, to think about what is a right communication strategy from a police service when they feel like the bad information is circulating about them. So best practices in terms of how to handle that type of situation. We also were concerned a little bit about the way in which Mr. Leblanc's computer was seized for 3 months. It seemed to us it was more punishment than necessary, since the blog was already there if they needed the evidence of his whatever he had said about the police officer. So yes, trying to invite them to reflect a little bit on better practices that could be useful not only for Fredericton service, but police service, but to all police services across Canada.
For people who are listening to us this morning, Ms. Desrosiers, who may be wondering what all the fuss is about, would you mind explaining why you think this is a serious issue?
Well, the serious issue, I think, is we do not want to live in a society where when you criticize the police, they come to your door and charge you with criminal libel, it might stifle criticism. In totalitarian regime in Syria and elsewhere, certainly that's a possibility, but that shouldn't be a possibility in Canada. People are allowed to be to criticize authorities, and we should be mindful of the way in which you can silence and prevent people from expressing sometimes right criticism about the police or the government without fearing that they will be put in jail for it. So it's a protection of freedom of expression and democracy, and we should also always be vigilant about the way in which people may abuse their powers and go after critics.
Are there legislative measures or legal measures that could be in place to prevent similar situations from happening in the future?
Well, certainly I think we've been asking the Minister of Justice in Ottawa to amend the criminal codes to make sure that the criminal libel provisions, which has been ruled unconstitutional in 3 provinces, is removed completely from the books, so there's no temptation to use it anymore. So that's one possibility. I think there are some, I'm sure that there are some people that are thinking that we should kind of move in other provinces to have another declaration of unconstitutionality to press the issue, and that may occur as well.
What do you anticipate the consequences of Mr. Richard's report will be for Mr. Leblanc?
Well, I think we hope that he'll have a sense of vindication in terms of what happened to him. There certainly, I think, is no other recourse, I think, at this stage. I think there may be some possibility of getting damages eventually, but that's not what's going to happen today. Certainly, I think the other part I think is greater for the public is to see that the system works. If you have an inquiry and they do find that things have been done in an inappropriate fashion and put in place the corrective so it doesn't happen again, that's what we hope for, is that there's a capacity to improve, for improvement in the system.
One of the questions that you raise is, did any officer in the Fredericton police force raise questions about the appropriateness of what was being done? What were you trying to get at there? Were you trying to look at the culture within the Fredericton Police Department?
Well, we always want to ensure that if vindictive actions is taken by one police officer, it's normal. Some people are humans and they get really angry, and that there be some ways in which they can be slowed down or stopped. That there would be a culture that actually worries about whether the police is going too far or are abusing their power and so on. So I think maybe Mr. Richard has looked a little bit about the decision-making process within the force in terms of how the charges were decided to be laid and whether there was any check to make sure that this was the appropriate thing to do.
You mentioned a moment ago the possibility of Mr. Leblanc seeking damages. Is there any precedent for that response anywhere in Canada?
Well, there would be some precedent. Certainly are new cases about unconstitutional action being taken where people received small amounts of damages, and that may be that certainly is a possibility that has been discussed with Mr. Leblanc here, and we'll see after this afternoon whether there's some still the possibility still alive for that. So yes, it's a consideration for sure.
Okay, how would you describe your communication with Mr. Richard?
We make submissions in writing and spoke to Mr. Richard as well. So we had I think he was in a position where he consulted people and wanted to receive submissions from the public. So we took the opportunity. We do that often. We appear in Parliament. We appear in front of the legislature. We write to people. trying to inform decision makers about what are what we see elsewhere, the good practices that we've seen developing elsewhere. And for us, I think when officers are defamed or when the authorities are criticized, we try to make sure that the authorities react in considering the impact on freedom of expression and engage in more speech, not less. They have the ability to correct the information in the public domain, and that's what they should do, as opposed to using the criminal law to silence their critic.
And Ms. Desrosiers, if the findings of Mr. Richard's report are not satisfactory to you, will you be pursuing this?
Well, we are continuing, I think, to try to ensure that freedom of expression is well protected throughout Canada. And certainly, we think the criminal code should be amended to reflect what the state of the law is, as opposed to leaving this uncertainty hanging and creating the possibility that the provision may be used again. So yes, that's our job. We're trying to ensure that the law as it is applied, continues to reflect the Constitution.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nathalie Desrosiers is General Counsel of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association based in Ottawa. The city of Fredericton is releasing Bernard Richard's report on the Charles Leblanc case this afternoon at 2 o'clock. And tomorrow morning, we'll have Bernard Richard on the program to talk about his findings.